It is the Carney government's first big test with two possible results. Either they can pass their newly released budget with opposition support in the minority House, or they get voted down on a budget confidence vote. They're expected to face their first confidence vote related to the budget. That's going to happen a little bit later this hour. It's actually on an amendment proposed by an opposition party, but the NDP is expected to support the government on that, so we don't anticipate the government will fall. But they are going to have to get support in order to pass the budget itself. So will they be able to? Let's bring in our front bench to talk about that. Former BC Premier Christy Clark is here. She's a senior advisor with Bennett Jones now. Marco Mendicino is former chief of staff to Prime Minister Mark Carney and a former Liberal cabinet minister. CTV political analyst and former Conservative industry minister James Moore is with us. He's now a policy advisor at Edelin. And rounding us out this evening, Tony Clement served in senior roles in Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper's cabinet. He's now CEO of Tony Clement International. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Christy, I'll start with you. Do you think they're going to have any issue getting the budget across the finish line? And what do you think it did or didn't do for this government?
Well, look, at the moment, it looks like it's going to get across the finish line. I mean, I was just in Ottawa yesterday, and as I'm sure you've heard, Vashi, everybody in the Liberals is talking about two more coming over from the Conservatives. I think that might be wishful thinking, but you never know. The other thing that's unpredictable is poor old Don Davies, who I think is a prince of a guy, is managing this kooky caucus. And I don't think anybody can lay reasonable bets on what they're all going to do at the end of the day. But I think in general, yes, I think the budget will pass. I'm not sure that people see a whole lot of interest. I mean, most parties don't see a whole lot of interest in another election happening right away. And whoever triggers it, I think will bear some blame for that. Nobody wants a Christmas election, I don't think. And I think most Canadians do sort of want to see Mark Carney get his chance here and see, even if it doesn't, even if they're not prepared to give him a full 4 years, I don't know. I think they will want to give him a better chance than he's had so far to make some of the plans that he's put together work.
James, as the budget was being released, we were together on air. It's been a few days since then. As you look at sort of how it was billed versus what was delivered, what is your assessment?
Well, it was overhyped and under-delivered, but it doesn't mean that there aren't some significant things in the budget that are meaningful to the economy. I mean, on the positive side, look at military spending. $81 billion in new spending on the military, which has sort of two benefits to it. On the high level, it provides the government of Canada, broadly speaking, all Canadians, to be seen to be getting closer to our NATO commitment of 3 to 5% now of GDP towards military spending, and that's good. But on the other hand, if they do procurement in such a way that will actually allow Canada to create more independence from our reliance and full alignment with the United States entirely on military spending, it creates some real benefit for Canada in actually exercising a little bit of independence and choice in how we want to move forward. Now, a quarter of that money goes to retention and salaries within the military, but I think that military spending money of $81 billion is a significant, really important part of this budget in terms of Canadian independence. The other new spending on, localized infrastructure projects, national infrastructure projects, we'll have to wait and see the timeline of how that money is going to be meted out and see what kind of economic benefits we get from that. But, overall, the budget, I mean, it doesn't deserve a failing grade. It doesn't deserve an A+. It probably deserves a C or a C+, but it was certainly overhyped relative to what we're getting. And I think the biggest failing on this is actually on the political side. And then in that, there were no sort of populist measures in there, no sort of tangible things that people can feel immediately, like a reduction in the GST or a tax credit or a child tax benefit or something in the window that is on a retail political basis that people can feel immediately upon the budget's passage. So I think that was probably the political misstep of the budget, if there was one.
Marco, do you think that's by design? And I listened to a lot of the questioning of the government on that, and often you'll hear the Prime Minister or others say, but the tax cut that we did, based on the campaign when we first came into office, or the consumer carbon tax, we cut that, like referencing older actions to kind of, pose it against or posit against the fact that none of that exists in a new way in this budget. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you could be right, and it is not an unusual device for the government to come back to tangible tax breaks. For example, the first thing that the government did, as we all know, is provide a tax break for 22 million Canadians. But I think, to come back to your central question, that the budget is likely to pass for a number of reasons. One, to quote Stephen Pelosi, who you just had on, it's got all the right ideas. It strikes the balance between showing restraint which is something that I hear about among industry leaders. It shows, to quote the clip that you had from Tiff Macklem, the current governor, transformational investments around important priorities, including, as James just said, around defense spending, which will strengthen our sovereignty and our security. And I think, just to come back full circle to the premise of your question to me, that the Prime Minister transmits a tone of seriousness, that this is serious work, that there's a lot of turmoil, there's a lot of noise that is going on in the world, in the chamber, but he's focused. And so as long as he transmits that he's doing serious work, that the government is doing serious work with steady hands, then yeah, I think this budget is likely to pass.
Tony, what do you think? We know the Conservatives won't support it. Do you anticipate that? And I should point out that the NDP has definitely not shut the door to supporting it, so that tells us something. They haven't said that they will for sure, but they've also left open the door to abstention.
Yeah, it's hard to contemplate the budget not passing. Stranger things have happened in Canadian politics, so you never say never. But I think it is also appropriate for the Conservative Party to vote against the budget. I think that the constituency that voted Conservative in the last election was really focused on cost of living issues, on the cost of housing, on the cost of groceries, on just how tough it is to live in Canada right now. And it ain't getting any better, folks. So I think that constituency that did vote Conservative in the last election does deserve a voice in Parliament. And that's exactly what the Conservatives are giving them. And, they'll live to fight another day on other issues and perhaps another budget if this one passes. But that debate is ongoing. Let's face it. There was a debate about who can best stand up to Donald Trump. And that debate evidently was won by Mark Carney in the last election. But there was another large group of people, younger people, millennials, et cetera, who felt that cost of living and just how are we going to survive in this country if everything is just so darn expensive, they deserve a voice in this Parliament as well.
That actually reminds me of something about this budget, Christy, that I wanted to ask you as someone who has, presided over the introduction of a number of budgets. The primary pitch of the budget or premise is that the stuff we're doing will create economic growth in the mid to long term and have a material impact on your life then when your wages are raised, the society's more productive, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't do anything for the cohort of people that Tony just spoke about, right? Who are feeling very anguished right now about their own economic fortunes or lack thereof. I wonder, do you think it's a communications challenge for the government to try and make this budget land with Canadians when the primary pitch is so far down the road?
Yeah, I don't know how far down the road it is. I mean, when you're talking about a budget that's intended to stimulate quickly economic growth, purchasing, the productivity deduction, for example, businesses purchasing, manufacturing and other kinds of a break on those kinds of real estate. I think what you could see, and if the government is making big investments in clearing land to build more homes, they're getting out there and building more ports and those kinds of things, you might see big job spin-offs from that quite quickly. It's not impossible. That's what we saw in British Columbia when we made investments in infrastructure. Governments can put a lot of people to work reasonably quickly by making the investments that they are in kind of public infrastructure. And this is an infrastructure budget, I think, unlike anything we've probably seen since Mr. Chrétien. So, or maybe James would argue with that because he was infrastructure minister under Stephen Harper. But this will create a lot of jobs just in the process of getting there. I was surprised, though, to kind of note the dissonance between the Prime Minister saying, well, we're going to have lots of sacrifices. It's going to be hard for the next generation. And then in this budget, there wasn't a whole lot of explanation about why it's going to be hard and how it's going to get better. But I presume they're going to be working hard to answer that question in the coming weeks and months. They need to.
I've just got about 30 seconds left. Last word to you on this subject, James.
Yeah, a lot of these are macroeconomic solutions for a micro retail economic challenges. The politics of it are retail anxieties of people's everyday life and cost pressures, and the solutions that are in the budget are more macro. Hopefully, look, from Christie's mouth to God's ears, hopefully it does result in the kind of job spin-offs and economic growth that will sort of draw down into the benefits of everyday Canadians. But there's nothing really sort of tangible that's immediate of benefit to everyday Canadians. And I think that's where Conservatives see their opportunity.